Hey friend, thank you for checking out this webinar. At Church Juice, we are committed to helping churches energize their communications. And everything we provide at Church Juice, including this webinar, is entirely free. You can find all the latest church communication resources by going to our website, churchjuice.com. I'm Brian Haley. I'm part of the team here at Church Juice, and I hope that you will find today's webinar on creating an annual sermon calendar helpful, challenging, and encouraging as you journey to serve your congregation better. Today's webinar is led by Justin Trapp from Ministry Pass. Ministry Pass is an organization that serves church leaders with everything you need to create an impactful sermon series. Now let's jump in.
What is this? Who is this webinar for? This is for pastors at small to medium-sized churches. That's who Ministry Pass aims to serve. We aim to serve the pastors at small to medium-sized churches, church planners. If you're a bivocational pastor, this is a great webinar for you. A teaching pastor, maybe you're at a larger church, and your primary responsibility is teaching and communication on a broad scale, or a creative team. We have members for a Ministry Pass at small churches, a lot of small churches, a lot of bivocational pastors, but also a lot of mega churches. Creative teams will utilize our media assets as well. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how to plan a sermon calendar. Now, every year since we launched Ministry Pass, we have released a sermon calendar for the past 8 years. And it started with just 3 calendars. It started with a topical calendar, a youth calendar, and a kids. And this year we're releasing 7 calendars. We have a topical calendar, an expository calendar, a youth and kids. We have a lectionary calendar. And then we have a 1-year sermon series that works through the book of Exodus. And we have a 1-year sermon series that works through the book of Matthew. And so we're releasing those the first week of October. And a lot of people are always really excited about seeing those. But today, since we've created so many sermon series, and since we've been releasing sermon calendars for the past 8 years, I thought I'd share a few lessons we've learned along the way, whether it be in our own experience pastoring and preaching week in and week out, or as we've worked with other church leaders and our team has worked together to create some sermon calendars, some of the tips and things that we like to do when we're preparing a sermon calendar. So let's just talk for a few seconds about the benefits of a sermon calendar. If you've never prepared one or worked on one, or maybe you just work series to series, and that's okay. But some of the benefits of a sermon calendar is it will help you preach better. And the reason why it'll help you preach better is if you know that you're preaching on forgiveness 3 months from now, man, maybe there's a story that you read in the news this week. And because you know that you're preaching about forgiveness 3 months from now, you can sort of file that away. You can add that to your sermon notes. You can add that to an Excel file. If you use Sermonary, you can add it to a sermon in Sermonary and just save it. And then when you get to that sermon series in 3 months, you have a wonderful illustration of the power of forgiveness. It gives you structured freedom. I know that some of the pushback we get sometimes is I just don't want to put the Holy Spirit in a box, and I don't want to box him in. And I think what this does is this allows you to have some structure, and you can have some freedom in that structure, and you can know, like, hey, maybe we do have a full-on calendar, but maybe something happens in our society, or maybe something happens in your congregation, and you feel like you need to pause. You need to maybe change gears for a second. That's totally okay. But you have the freedom to do that. But there's also that structure in place that kind of gives you some stability. It makes it easier for you to add people to your preaching team. Man, this is one of the biggest things that we hear when we tell pastors, like, hey, you shouldn't be preaching 50, 60 times a year. Like, just the toll, the cumulative effect that has on you. I don't know anywhere else in society where a people group like pastors prepares essentially a thesis paper or a college term paper every single week, spends hours and hours and hours on top of all of their other responsibilities, right? And then gives a presentation to a diverse room of people. You have the single mother who's unchurched and the retired couple who's been in church all their life, and everybody in between them. It's a lot. I don't think we give ourselves and pastors enough credit for how hard it is to preach a sermon, and how hard it is to preach a sermon almost every single week. And one of the things that we hear is, I just don't have anybody at my church that can give me a Sunday off. I don't have anybody that I trust. I mean, we've been there, right? I think one of the easiest ways to add people to your preaching team is to have a calendar, because then you can go, hey, maybe you go to an elder and you say, listen, I know you have a great, a powerful testimony on redemption, and we're going to be doing a series in 2 months on redemption. And I was just wondering if you'd be able to take week 2 of that series, because I think you could share that story. And here's some passages that I think would be good to sort of center the sermon around. And you could add your thoughts. Here's a few talking point ideas. And man, now you actually have helped them, right? You could do this with your youth pastor, children's leader as well. So I think one of the easiest ways to add people is to get prepared and get ahead, because then you can kind of coach them along that process. It helps you avoid preaching on the same topics. I mean, gosh, I remember one time I preached on David 3 times in 1 year, didn't realize it till the end of the year. I started looking back at everything that I had preached on, and I realized, man, I love the story of David and Goliath. I need to be a little bit more balanced. It provides a yearly roadmap for your church, and then it gives you a balanced discipleship plan. I just sort of alluded to that. Balanced discipleship, what does that look like? Well, if you have balanced discipleship, you can evaluate your preaching calendar. What is your Old Testament and your New Testament breakdown? What are you talking about the most? You have doctrinal series, consecrational series, pastoral, ethical, evangelistic. And when you preach through books or large passages of scripture, it's harder to, only stay on your hobby horse like I was with David and Goliath. So let's start in January. January is a great month for a series on new beginnings, spiritual disciplines, and the attributes of God work well for the beginning of the year. New year themed, fresh start. You could do habit formation. You could do a series on spiritual disciplines, the attributes of God, sort of building block topic as you prepare for Easter. I think that works really well there. You could talk about the reality of sin. Of course, this is a building block topic as you prepare for Easter as well. And one of the things I did want to show you guys is some of the series that we have on Ministry Pass that go with each month. So this is a series called Reset, a fresh start to a new year. So self-explanatory. I believe this is a 1-week series. So if you preach a 1-week sermon, we still consider this a series. We have the book of Genesis, and this is a 10-week overview of the major stories and themes in Genesis. It goes from Genesis 1 to 11, tells of God and his relationship to the entire world, while Genesis 12 through 50 describes God's relation to Abraham and his descendants. And then, if you wanted to work through a book of the Bible in January, I'd say you could start with Genesis, Exodus, or Isaiah. Those are good books for the attributes of God, or Romans, talking about the reality of sin. So that's January. February, because Valentine's Day and many churches launch small groups during February. Topics like community, relationships often work really well. You could also do a missions program theme in February, and then you could do a series on your church, the purpose of your church. It sort of lets newcomers know what your church is all about. But also, if you haven't had, a lot of people go through your new members class lately, it's been a while. It's always good to come back to the beginning, right? Come back to the start and say, hey, what do we want our church to represent in our community? What is our purpose here? What are we called to do? I think February is actually a good month to do that. We have a series from Ministry Pass called Purity Culture. It's a 4-week series at the historic Christian teachings regarding sex and relationships, and it combats really unbiblical ideas that have crept into our church culture. The series, it'll ruffle a few feathers, but it might settle some others. Here's a Mission Sunday, advancing the gospel. So you could do a Mission Sunday for like a 1-week series, or you could just do a 3-week series if you wanted to do something in February like that. We also have a series called A Church in Crisis. It really takes us through 1 Corinthians, and the biblical letter Paul addresses some of the very serious issues within the church, and he also speaks to issues present day, for us, for you and I, for the people in your congregation. So that's another series that we have for February. And then March, it leads up to Easter. You could do a series on Lent, or through one of the Gospels, or You could do a short series on Jesus' life. I think all of those would be beneficial to your congregation. Here's a series that we have. It's a Lent series. It's called Grounding. It's a 7-part series that is intended to use during Lent. Lent is a time to pause and reflect and to consider the foundational tenet, right, of the Christian faith, that we are all sinners in need of Jesus. And so I think this is a great series leading up into Easter. Let's talk about March. Some good books to go through. A series on the Old Testament prophecies concerning Jesus, I think, is a good spot. The Gospels, of course, right, leading up to Easter. I think that's always a natural. Some of those books that you can work through as you build up to the Jesus' death and resurrection. We have a series called The Promise, and it is this is a large one, right? This is a 16-week sermon series that looks at the whole Gospel of Matthew. The messages in here examine the broader themes in Matthew, like God's character, Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament promises for Messiah. So this is a great, if you like working through books of the Bible, doing something like Matthew leading up to Easter, I think is really good. And then you get to April, and of course it's Easter, and you could do an attention-grabbing series that will catch guests' eye. You could do something controversial. You could do something attractional, or you could do an application-type series where, how can we apply the story of Easter now that we've learned about Jesus' death and resurrection. You could do a series like right after Easter. What do we do after salvation? Here's a 1-week series for Easter Sunday. Obviously, it tells the story of Jesus' death and resurrection from the Gospel of Matthew. Here's another one. It's a little bit more classical take. This again is a series from the Gospel of Matthew, a 1-week series for Easter. And then, we talked about this after Easter. You could do a series that helps new believers or recommitted believers to live out their faith. We did a series a while back called Vivid, and it was an after Easter series, and there's something really cool. There was an illustration in the series guide that really, it was 2 illustrations. One was you could do this 3D thing where we gave you some 3D graphics, and you can buy everyone in the place some the cheap 3D glasses, so they could put those on for parts of the message. But then there was an illustration where we wanted you to play a video. And a video is, you've probably seen it, where they have those colorblind glasses, and a family bought the dad colorblind glasses because he was colorblind. So he's able to see for the first time. It was really cool. Well, a pastor that had wanted to preach through that series, Vivid, knew that there was a guy in their congregation. He was sort of a staple in the community, and he had been colorblind all his life. So when they passed out 3D glasses to everyone, what he didn't know is they actually passed out colorblind glasses to him. They bought him a pair. And so that man saw color for the first time during the message. A really special story for our team and for their church, really special moment. So you get creative with it, right? This is a series called Flashback, and it's a 6-week series that really works through Romans 12 and 13 and examines Paul's commands to us to be a living sacrifice, right? To live our lives in the light of what God has done for us through Christ. And so that's a series you could do. If you wanted to preach through books of the Bible in April, you could do Amos, you could do 1 Corinthians, you could do Joshua. I think all of these books bode well for April. And then you get to the summer. And the summer is really, the summer is a transitional season. It's the perfect time to focus on discipleship. You could do leadership training. You could do a series that prepares your people for evangelism. You have lots of people, coming and going. It's a very transient season. So, I don't know that I would do, you could do an attractional series. I know a church that always does their biggest series of the year. I'll actually show you here in a second, called God on Film. And they do their biggest sermon series of the year in the summer. And they always grow a little bit in the summer. It's kind of wild when all the other churches around are sort of declining or people are traveling and they're out for the summer. This church really thrives in the summer because they go really hard on the attractional side. So God on Film, like I mentioned. So God on Film is a series where You take a look at the movies coming out that summer, each one, and look at it through a biblical perspective, a biblical lens. And, they get fun with it, right? They do movie posters, like their church lobby looks like a movie theater atrium lobby where you got free popcorn for everybody. And so they go very attractional here in the summer. Again, I said you could do leadership. You could do a series on being a good neighbor, evangelism. You could do a pastoral. You could go a little deeper, right? Less attraction, go a little bit deeper and do pastoral, consecrational, a doctrinal series, or you could do an apologetic series. I think any of these can go different directions, work well for the summer. Here's a series that we have on Ministry Pass called Summer Break. And this is a 4-week series that looks at some misunderstandings of theology and challenges us to break the bad thinking before it breaks us. And this is a great series on Ministry Pass, Breaking Bad Theology. I love this series. It's called Summer on the Mount, the Kingdom Manifesto. It's an 8-week series that will take your congregation on a journey through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And so I think this is you could do this in June, July. This would be real appropriate for that. And then God and Justice. So this is a 4-week series that focuses on how God addresses oppression, judges with fairness, and emboldens the believer to advocate for the vulnerable in an unjust world. So I think this is another series that you could do in the summer. If you wanted to work through books of the Bible, you could choose one of the epistles. I love doing Proverbs in the summer as well. And I think both of these books will work really well for this season. And let me back up. Let me back up to the beginning. Why do we have certain books or certain topics, right, for the different months? I think the year, our calendars, right, have this ebb and flow, this natural dynamic built in where it gets really busy towards the end of the year with Christmas. That slows down at points, it speeds up. And so a lot of these topics and a lot of these series are sort of laid in place in these different seasons, these different rhythm changes. And so, what I'm saying isn't gospel, right? But I have seen that if you can lean into certain topics, if you can lean into certain books of the Bible, if you can lean into certain types of series, it can help generate momentum in that season for you, just naturally. So I digress here. So September is a great month. People are coming back to church. School has started. People have been back for a few weeks now. You have church people come back that haven't been to church in a long time. Maybe they're newcomers. Maybe they moved, right? They're new to your community. They moved over the summer and they've been traveling. They're finally sort of settled into their house and they're ready to go to church. You could consider doing a topical series in September, a series that really connects with everybody, right? Connects with everybody, reaches everybody. Or you could do a Bible book series that feels immediately applicable. I would say September and March are kind of similar, right? The lead up to Easter and September, everyone's sort of in this rhythm, right? So September works well for marriage and family. Everyone has a family, right? And most people in the room are married or have been married. Pain and suffering. Everyone in the room has experienced pain and suffering in some form or purpose and meaning. Again, you're wanting to choose a topic in September that's really, really going to just hit well with everybody. Everyone is going to walk away with something from the sermon. Jonah, right? The relentless love of God. This is a 2-week series that we have on Ministry Pass, and it looks at Jonah's 2 main actions: running from God and responding to God's call. So I love this 2-week series. This is a series by Wade. Man, I was so excited to let him talk about this series. Wade just recently released this book, To My Friend Who Left the Faith. It's a series on doubt and faith, and it's a really great book. He writes letters to different friends who have walked away, and it's a book filled with grace and hope, and amidst the topic of doubt. And so we turn this into a sermon series, and everyone in your place has probably experienced some sort of doubt, right? And as they worked through their faith journey throughout the years. And so I think this is a great series to do in the fall as you head into the November months. We have a series called Social Faith, and it walks through the positive and the negative effects that social media has on our faith, our relationships, our overall character, and our integrity. So I think this, everyone's on social media, so this series sort of works. If you wanted to work through books of the Bible, you could do Ephesians, which centers on our identity in Christ. You could work through, I mentioned it earlier, I showed you Jonah, God's love. It could be an evangelistic series. Let me take a drink real quick. And then you head into October with the fall and Halloween. You could consider doing a weightier topic. Everything gets spooky or dark in October with the seasons changing, but also just the theme of the month. It seems like Halloween is a very large holiday, and a lot of churches have different fall festivals or trunk or treat events, and so you could lean into that. We have this series. It's a 4-week series called The Sting. And the series follows death from Genesis to Revelation. It recounts the beginning, its sting, and its multiple losses until its final defeat through the work of Christ on the cross. And so this is a cool series to do in October. I love this next series. It's called Secrets We Should Keep. And this is a 3-part series that looks at Jesus' teachings on giving, prayer, and fasting in Matthew 6. And he tells us to do all of these things in secret, where our Father alone can see and reward us. And so I think this is a great series because as you head into November, it is a season where people are paying it forward. They're getting ready for Christmas. It just seems like the world in general, right, is a little bit more generous towards the end of the year. I think this is even a great prequel before you get into November. The 5 Solas is another series that you could do. It's a series that looks at the 5 solas, and the series will define them and show how they work themselves out in our doctrine, in our lives. And if you wanted to work through a book of the Bible, Revelation is kind of fun, actually, for October. Actually, it's a lot of fun. You could also do Judges. I think both of those books are very seasonally appropriate. I mean, they're appropriate for any month of the year, but I think in October they can be a little extra. So November, I mentioned this earlier, with Thanksgiving and Christmas on the way, topics like generosity, thankfulness, and selflessness fit really well during this time of year. One of our, I'll share it in a moment, a series that I think is really, really fun. The themes of November that we like to lean into are generosity, thankfulness, maybe the Sermon on the Mount. Is going to be really good. I love this series, the Gratitude Challenge. We released this last year, and I think this is such a timeless series. It's a 3-week series that examines, the scripture to see what gratitude might look like if it's practiced every day. And so, teaching your people to maybe write down something they're thankful for, they're grateful for every day, because it's hard not to be generous, right? It's hard to sort of want to keep it all when you find yourself being grateful for everything that God has given us, and you want to share that with others. This is a series called Thanksgiving. It's a 3-week Thanksgiving series, and it addresses how we can develop and practice gratitude, right, in our lives, and thanksgiving to God, and which turns, it leads to a life of generosity. And I worked at a company when I was bivocational. I worked at a company, and it was just a corporate company, right? It was a pipeline contractor company, but the CEO was a very generous man. And one of the things that I really appreciate about him is he really led by example on generosity. And he did this thing every year where he would give out gift cards to everyone in the company. But the gift card wasn't for you. The gift card was for you to give it to somebody else. And it was their Pay It Forward campaign. And every year we heard just tons and tons of stories from people. And I thought it was such a cool idea. I've always held on to that experience that I gave. And so our team will do that as well. But I also think it'd be cool if you could figure out something to do with your church to be able to enable and equip your church to be generous, that centers around an event or in a moment. That I think that's just really special because generosity is contagious. And if your people can catch it, if you can facilitate generosity through them, through your teaching, through a series, but also perhaps through an event, Generosity sticks, and I think your people will love being a part of that. So if you're able to do that, if you want to work through some books of the Bible, you could work through Psalms, you could do Ecclesiastes, you could do Philippians. I think any of these books work really well for the November month. And then Christmas. Christmas is coming. It's, I'm in Houston, so it is, we are just getting, for the first time, normal temperatures, but lower humidity. So it feels like fall is coming. And as soon as fall, is around the corner, Christmas is around the corner. We start seeing Christmas trees for sale at Home Depot and everywhere, really, right? As soon as October 1st hits, they'll be out in full force. It can't even get through Halloween anymore. Christmas is ready to go. So I think it's important that when you do your Christmas series, that it's the same content, right? It's the same story, but maybe you tell it a different way, or it's a new angle. And there's some different ways to frame it too. I'll show you here in a second. So you could do Christmas at the movies. I mean, we all have movies growing up, Christmas movies. Your kids love certain Christmas movies. I love The Grinch. And that's a really fun attractional series. I'll show you here in a second what that artwork looks like. You can do the songs of Christmas. We all have songs. Christmas is filled with lots of songs, and I love Christmas music. You can do the Christmas angelic messages. I'll show you that here in a second. Or you could do Advent. Maybe your church has never worked through Advent together. I think that'd be really cool to do a series on Advent. Here's Christmas at the movies. This is a really, really fun series that we have on Ministry Pass. And, I think this could be a real nostalgic type of topical series for your congregation. It explores the beauty and the importance of the incarnation through the lens of 4 classic Christmas films. So that's a really fun series. We have Advent, Hope Revived. And this, of course, this series focuses on the theme of hope for about 4 weeks in the Advent season. We have A Weary World Rejoices. This series is a 4-week series, and it deals with the stress, the weariness, and the busyness, right, that comes with the Christmas season. And you see Dan. I'm trying to stay focused here, but I saw Dan said he's seen Christmas trees in Lowe's and Home Depot already, and Hobby Lobby. Man, there it is. Christmas is already upon us, and I'm still in 90-degree weather here in Houston. So, Lord, let Christmas come quickly. And the cool weather. Go Tell It on the Mountain. I love this series. This might be my favorite series this year for Christmas. And this series looks at the angelic messages around Christ's birth. So the angel's message to Elizabeth in Luke 1, the angel's message to Mary in Luke 1, and the angel's message to the shepherds in Luke 2. Go Tell It on the Mountain. This could be a lot of fun. Maybe have your church band or the choir, you do like a little 30-second a cappella thing right before you come up for your sermon or something. That could be a lot of fun. All I Want for Christmas. It's another series. It's a 3-week series. And this is a youth series, but I think it could be applied to adults and kids as well, to be honest with you, because the message is sort of for all ages. And it's a message that encourages believers to live a life of generosity and love because of the gift of Jesus to all of us. And so I think this is a great series for that. Christmas, you wanted to preach through a book of the Bible, you could go Old Testament, connect Isaiah and the Messiah and Jesus. You could do Luke. Luke is obviously a natural choice here. And then John 1, you could do John chapter 1 and work through that in the Christmas season. So Costco, man, Michigan already has Christmas in full force. So that's how to plan a yearly sermon calendar. I don't know if anybody here has heard of ministry, and I'm going to open up for Q&A here in a second. So I don't know if you guys have ever used Ministry Pass or heard of Ministry Pass, but we have a library of sermon series. That's what we do. We create sermon series every single month. And we have media and announcement graphics too and video stuff. But our primary focus is really helping pastors and churches create balanced discipleship plan using our sermon calendars, or you can maybe see how we do our sermon calendar and you can mix and match, or you can say, you know what, I love that for inspiration. I'd like to take a few of these series and maybe add our own here. That's totally great. I think it's just important in general that you have a plan. And when people ask me what is required to create a sermon series, because a lot of times if you're the pastor at a small to medium sized church, you're the primary. You're wearing all the hats, right? You're wearing the researcher hat, the theologian hat. You're the wise sage. You're coming up with the quotes, the life lessons. Maybe if you're a pastor at a church where you don't have any graphic design help, or you're a volunteer that does that, you're the artist. And I've met so many pastors that they're doing it all, and you're the organizer. So pastors, you're wearing all these hats. And again, it takes a lot of work to work on one sermon, much less 4-week series or a 10-week series. And you're wearing all these hats and you're doing all these things. And I think what we've tried to do at Ministry Passive, we've really tried to help you in some of these areas. Let our team be part of your team. And you still have to develop the sermon through your own unique voice. We only give pastors sort of, I would say, the framework, right? The building blocks to start with. Maybe the first 10%, the first 15%. The rest is through your unique voice, through your unique context and your community. So, we have sermon illustrations that help you with the research side of things, the sermon guides for the theologian hat. We have a sermon series library. Like we said, we have series graphics, and then we have our sermon calendars that can help you stay organized. So every series guide that we have comes with, or every sermon series comes with a series guide. It comes with talking point ideas, a big idea of each message, sermon illustrations that you can utilize. Of course, the Bible passages, that's where we start. The graphics for the series, the bumper video, a countdown video that matches that artwork. We give you the Photoshop layers if that's your thing, or we also have all of the graphics and the JPEGs that you need without having to touch Photoshop. And I don't even have this on here, but we introduced a Canva integration. So somebody at your church uses Canva. It's really, really easy to edit graphics and edit the text using Canva. And with your Ministry Pass membership, all you have to do is to click the Canva button, take you to Canva, and you can have all that stuff over there. We're doing something just for the church use community. And if you skip the trial, you're going to save about $120. So it comes out to about $59 a month. And you can go to ministrypass.com/webinar, and that'll allow you to have access to all this stuff. So I would like to turn it back over to Brian. I know we've had some Q&A and some poll stuff. So love to hear from you guys if you have any questions, and see if we can help you on planning out your sermon calendars.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate your expertise in this area. I do have a few questions that have come in through a couple different ways, but wanted to just look at the polls real quick and just kind of visit them. I was kind of surprised by this. We asked how far in advance people plan their sermon series, and it was actually pretty well tied. But yeah, I was surprised that there weren't more people between like 1 and 2 months or 3 to 6 months, but pretty well, like, I guess kind of what I expected. But yeah, I thought, in conversations with a lot of pastors that I talked to, like knowing how last minute things get forced and how you have so much on your plate as you're preaching that, preparing the sermon just kind of, it waits till Friday or Saturday. So yeah. So I know how that is, but yeah, I was kind of surprised that it wasn't more weighted one way or another. So yeah.
Well, I think if you're here, right, if you're watching this and you attended this, you care about planning. So naturally, right. We're a few more planners in here. We always, Brian, we always do our big sermon calendar release event in the first week of October. And we have a few thousand pastors that will watch that. And then we do the same exact event the first week of January. And it's like a different set of pastors watching. So we have the early planners in October, and then the guys and gals that are like, hey, I need help next week. For the beginning of the year. So I've been in both of those seats in my ministry career, admittedly. So.
It happens. All right. So a couple questions for you. First, I know that one of the people that are watching kind of commented on this, that they're trying to figure out how to plan and organize a sermon calendar, but helping with a preaching team, trying to help schedule how to incorporate different people preaching throughout the calendar year. So what do you say to that? How do you help kind of that process as well?
Well, I do think that if you're going to incorporate people, I will say I found it helpful that everyone adheres to the same, like for instance, it's really easy because I have ministry pass as a reference. So let's say we choose a series on grace, right? It's a 4-week series, and we're going to have 3 different speakers, and I'm going to do 2 of those weeks. I'm going to do the first week and the last week as pastor. I think it's really helpful if everyone's sort of working with the same format or the same rhythm, so to speak, so that or the same content. I think that's important. So one thing that I've done that I don't think is great in the past is I've said, hey, I want to do a series on evangelism. Can you take week 3 and here's some of my notes? And then there's no other development that happens. Because then what happens is it doesn't feel like one cohesive series, one cohesive thought from a few different perspectives. It feels like 4 individual sermons, right? That just say that they're the same topic matter. And so I think that's important when you're introducing people to a preaching team, that you sort of all follow the same format, so to speak. Everyone has everyone's notes. And if you can use something like a curriculum or a plan or a ministry pass, I think that helps if you've never had a preaching team, because then everyone's working with the same playbook, so to speak.
Yeah, I kind of echo that, I guess. I think that, when everyone comes to the page, like on the same page, I guess shouldn't use page twice in that sentence, but when you all come to the table on the same page, like that just helps so much in the planning and preparation and, for everyone involved. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, if someone wanted to, practically speaking, like I want to lay out the next 12 months or the next calendar year of sermons and the series that we're going to do, how do you think that, what is the best way to go about that? Obviously, you guys have tons of resources and ideas and things like that, but practically speaking, what does that look like for the pastor who's, just trying to get through this week, basically?
Yeah. So I think you start with a few questions, right? I think it starts with an evaluation. What have we preached on the last 12 months? What books of the Bible have we worked through? What topics have we worked through? Are there topics that we want to hit every year? Like a series on purpose or marriage and family or pain and suffering, topics that usually affect, that everyone has dealt with that topic in some sort of fashion. I think those topics tend to emerge every year, but that doesn't mean you have to do a marriage series every year. But again, take stock of what you've done in the past 12 months and then say, okay, Lord, what do you feel like that you want our people to work through this year? We haven't done an evangelistic series in 3 years, maybe. So maybe it's a good time. Maybe you see something in your community or in your congregation and we probably need to address. I think maybe you start with some of those questions. Lord, what do you want us to work through? Because if you can plan ahead, man, it gives you so much of a balanced approach, right? You're not, to bring it to dieting or something, like you're not just eating red meat every day for every meal, right? You have this balanced approach to what you're teaching them. And I think that's healthy. I think that's appropriate. And I think it's helpful actually for your people. So I would, start there. And then if you're a pastor, man, you got to do this, to be honest, as well. I think you just need to start looking at your personal calendar when you're looking at your preaching calendar, and you need to say, okay, when are we going to take family vacation? When are we going to what Sundays do I want to be off? Ask yourself, how many Sundays do you want to be off this year from preaching? And then just fill those in immediately and commit to that, right? Commit to that so that you can have that time off, so that you can go on a family vacation or 2 for some travel, or maybe you'd like to go to a conference or a pastor's conference, or go visit a friend of yours pastors a church and you want to go speak over there. Whatever the case may be, look at your personal calendar in tandem with your preaching calendar. And then you can start to earmark different dates, and you can say, okay, I'm going to be out for 2 weeks in June, or I'm going to, maybe I bring in a guest speaker for here. I think you look at that first, and then you can fill out the rest. Those are a few places that I would start, really taking stock of where you've been and then where you'd like to go from a content perspective, but also from a personal perspective, where you could add other speakers other than yourself. And then what days that you'd like to take off, because that does have an impact. But you don't want to get into a place, Brian, where it's, you've been preaching almost every Sunday for 6 months and you're tired and you want some time off, but you don't feel like you can take time off. I think the best way to avoid that is to just plan your time off ahead of time, a year in advance, just like you do your preaching calendar.
Yeah, which is so important. We hear pastors and ministry leaders, so many are burnt out after the last couple of years, and so many are leaving their church or leaving ministry altogether. So, building that in makes a lot of sense. You also said pretty early on in the presentation that structure creates freedom, or something like that. And that's something that we talk about a lot with communications too, right? Like, it just gives you that much more freedom to be flexible when you have some sort of structure in place. So Dan asked a question: what kind of people and how many people should be on a sermon prep team, the research team that helps develop the sermons?
Yeah. So I'd say what I would start with is people that you trust, not that they're going to be great presenters or preachers themselves, but you trust their character, you trust their heart, you trust their perspective, right? But so I think you start there, and then you have someone that's maybe had some experience speaking. I think it's good though that you have a little bit of balance in the people on your team. So maybe you have someone that's younger, a little bit younger. They provide a different perspective, a different angle than a lot of the older people on the team. And then maybe you can assign roles. You know how we have boards, right? We have a treasurer, and we have different roles on boards. I think the same thing is too, just like you have different roles on teams. I think you can have someone that's sort of taking notes all the time. They're there to take notes, and then they can contribute, but they don't have to contribute. This doesn't even have to be someone that you consider on your preaching team, but they are taking notes, and they are sort of your organizer, and they're keeping everything together, and they are sending you the notes of the meeting afterwards, or an Excel file, whatever the case may be. I think you have someone that's helping you research different topics, because if you're a pastor and you preach sermons for many years, we can waste 2 hours trying to Google to find some really perfect sermon illustration on sanctification, right? Like, and you don't have to do that. Right. There are things that only you, pastor, can contribute. Only you can add to that table because of your experience, because of your background, your training. But that doesn't mean you have to do everything. And there are certain things that almost anybody could do at that table, right? In that meeting, almost anybody could research. Everybody could, really. So try to delegate some of those things that just eat a lot of time for sermon prep, and just have them report back and send you stuff that they find, I think, going to be really, really happy with delegating some of those things. And of course, you have the artist, have a graphic designer. You're going to need that sort of creative element, and you're going to want to wrap up your series in a hook, so to speak, something that frames everything from a visual perspective, but also something that people can connect with, that can hook, that they can relate to or remember. And so it's not just a bunch of theologians. It's sort of a balanced group of, ragamuffin band, so to speak, that you get together. And I think that can make for a fun experience. It'll take work at first if you've never had sort of a preaching team, not necessarily a bunch of preachers, but working on the series together. But in the end, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan also asked, illustrations are the toughest to find, and asked you to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Dan. They are the toughest to find. We've always did hours of time, right? Because they're the toughest to find, Ministry Pass, we always put sermon illustrations in the series guides for every single week. And I think we give up to 4 or 5. And we're trying to find new and fresh illustrations we've all been in the sites, right, where it's feels like this illustration. I've heard this illustration used in a sermon like 40 times, so I'm not going to use it for my sermon. We have a series, an illustration site that we put a new sermon illustration on the site every single day. It's called illustrations.bible. You can go to that, and that's free, totally free. There's no membership or anything like that, but maybe check out illustrations.bible, and you can do some keyword searches, click on some of the topics and collections, and maybe you'll find something there that you think would be useful.
So I'm curious, for you guys at Ministry Pass, where do you come up with your sermon series? Who's making all of these series? Because I forget how much time did you say? How much content do you guys have?
About 80 years worth of content. So
yeah,
we meet every single week, every single month. We have a creative sermon meeting and series meeting, and we will work through different, it's just a process for us. We're working on the calendars all year long, our team is, but we're also working and producing about 17 sermon series every single month. So those series could be anywhere from 1 week to 12 weeks. So really, really working through that. And, we have pastors that come to the office and meet with our team. And we have some writers that all have, theology backgrounds and their masters and some PhDs. And so it's sort of a balance of people on our team and also outside people that we work with and try to come up with content that's solid and useful and helpful for pastors. I saw someone asked, is there a way to look at the details of your site before committing? Yeah. If you want to just go to, if you want to look at our sermon series right there, that's sort of our filter page. You can look through different sermon series. You can look through the youth and kids expository. That filter thing is on the left there, and you can look at the different series. That should sort of let you see what we have under the hood there. So.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Why don't you, maybe I missed this, but I would love to hear why you guys started Ministry Pass. What brought that about?
Well, I was in my early 30s and, I was serving our church. I was bivocational. So I was it was full-time, but paid part-time, you know what I mean? And love the Lord, love serving, but I also had to pay my bills and support my family. And I was tired, man. I was just tired. And I remember telling my wife, I don't know. I don't want to do this when I'm 40. That I just don't it's just tough. Working 70 hours a week, trying to do what I love, right? With serving in a local church, but also, paying the bills and all that. We didn't have kids yet. And we just found out we were pregnant. So a lot of things going on. Right. And so, I really wanted to, help pastors and we had a business that was helping, I would say, larger churches. And we served as a creative staff. If your church needed sermon graphics or sermon series bumper or video announcements, you needed help with your website, we sort of handled all of that. And we had about a dozen clients and it was fun, right? It was fun. And this was without a website. I kept getting people referring us to their friends. And we finally came out with a website, Brian. And I did this big campaign and we released it. And it wasn't called Ministry Pass at the time. It was actually called Marketing Matters. And we did this thing where we scheduled a bunch of phone calls with pastors to try to see if they want to sign up for Marketing Matters. And I think I had like 70 phone calls scheduled in 2 weeks between myself and Wade. And I started getting on the phone. And every single pastor I talked to was not a pastor at a church of 1,000. They were pastors of a church of 70. And they needed help. They called because they needed help. But they couldn't afford, a large retainer like a lot of these larger churches are paying. And so it made us realize that there's a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, a lot of church leaders out there that need help, that don't have time and don't have a lot of money. So what can you do? What can you do to help? And so that sort of was the genesis of this idea of Ministry Pass. And so
that's really awesome.
How it all started. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that, the people that I've talked to and how I came across Ministry Pass was, interacting with other churches that are using it and just hearing the stories of how practical it is. And that's why we reached out to you guys to lead this webinar. Just knowing how practical and easy to use and cost effective. Like, there are other options out there, but you're paying a lot. And so I think just knowing that this is something that, is created for the regular church, the small church that's, most of churches in the US and Canada. And so, I just appreciate what you guys are doing and see that as ministry too. So appreciate that. So we put out the offer for Ministry Pass. You guys can see the link there and head over to get more information and check it out. I would encourage you to do that. There's so many resources, like Justin was talking about, just available to you as a pastor or as part of the creative team or whatever that is at your church. So encourage that. But thank you, Justin.
Thank you. I'll say this too, Brian, to Ken, who had asked about if they could look at more stuff without committing. You totally can. In fact, anybody that's watching this can go to ministrypass.com and sign up for a 14-day free trial, and you can cancel anytime inside that 14 days. That's going to be more. It's $69 a month. So, it is a little bit more than the offer today. The offer today is you can sign up for $59 and you save about $120 for the year, but you do skip the trial. But if you prefer to do the trial and you want to be able to get in, download some things, look at some things, I totally understand that. And I get that. And so feel free to do that and reach out if you have any questions. Our support team is, there. In fact, one of the guys that leads our support team, he's a pastor himself. So he's bivocational. And he serves on our team to help other pastors as they have questions about Ministry Pass. So, feel free.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions popping up. And I want to appreciate your time, Justin, and you guys all for watching today. Encourage you to check out Ministry Pass, but also if you're new to Church Juice and figuring out who we are as a ministry, go to churchjuice.com and you can find all of our free resources always available there. Thank you guys for joining us. You will get the recording soon as it's all done and taken care of. So you can check that out in your email as well if you hopped on late or want to share it with your colleagues or friends. Thank you. Have a great day.